Happy Valentine's Day, guys. In honor of the holiday, we're going to do a video about love and marriage in the Middle Ages. And in particular, I wanted to talk a little bit about arranged marriage. For aristocrats in the Middle Ages, marriage was often arranged, and this was done primarily for political purposes. Personal concerns did come into it, though. There was, consideration for, are these two people appropriate for each other? Is this a good match between these two young people? And incidentally, this idea that arranged political marriage just meant that it was always some really young girl marrying some, really old, rich man. This is really kind of a caricature. This is inaccurate. This did happen. This sort of thing did happen at times, but actually it was frowned upon. If you read a lot of the writings about marriage from the Middle Ages, often there are notes taken about, the couple should not be too far apart in age. They should be suited to each other. So spouses did often have some input in who they married. I would say more often it was the husband who had input. Richard the Lionheart actually arranged his own marriage with his father-in-law, who was the King of Navarre. So he arranged to marry a princess of Navarre, Berengaria. And another example of this would be Baldwin II of Jerusalem, the Crusader king of Jerusalem. Before he became king of Jerusalem, when he was still Count of Edessa, he had a vassal who was a very wealthy Armenian aristocrat named Gabriel, who ruled this important city of Melitene. And Baldwin and Gabriel arranged for Baldwin to marry Gabriel's daughter, Morphia. But this isn't always the case. There are examples of the wife having input, or even arranging the marriage herself. For all practical purposes, Isabel I of Castile kind of arranged her own marriage to Fernando II of Aragon. He was involved in the negotiations for that too. So we have to kind of remember that there was a variety of ways in which this could play itself out. So the big question we're going to tackle today is happiness in an arranged marriage. Were these marriages happy? Okay. So this does go against our modern sensibilities, or at least people think it does. If you watch movies that are set in the Middle Ages, what's a common trope? Often you will see we've got the young daughter, the princess, and her father is arranging for her to marry some guy, and she says, "I'm not going to do that, father. I'm only going to marry for love." So basically she's introducing present day thinking or present day concepts of love and marriage into the medieval world, which would be impossible. Did noble girls from the Middle Ages really object to arranged marriage? I think we have to remember that this was the assumption for these people. This was their reality. This was their world. The idea that noble girls would have objected to an arranged marriage in the same way that, say, somebody today in the modern West would object to it, I think this is inaccurate. No, we have to take into account the fact that different historical periods had different attitudes, or the people in those periods had different attitudes than our own. And we have to allow for that when we're considering how they would have reacted to something like, say, an arranged political marriage. In our world today, marriage is related to this concept of lifestyle. And what is lifestyle? So lifestyle is a very, very much a term that belongs to the modern world, that belongs to our present day. This concept of a lifestyle would not have sprung, from the medieval mindset. And what this refers to is really the fact that the way that people live is kind of oriented toward their interests, toward their personal aspirations, the sorts of experiences they want to have, the sort of job they want to have. I want to, work in healthcare and live in the mountains or something, and on weekends I want to go skiing, and you get what I'm saying. I mean, people they chart their life in this way. And marriage is kind of like this. So I guess the question is, does this make people happier? Like the fact that people arrange their marriages in this way versus the way it was done in the Middle Ages, does this mean marriages are inherently better or happier than they were back then? I don't think there's much evidence of this. Obviously, divorce is a very common thing in our world today. So people, even though they're able to pick their own spouse, I don't think there's much evidence that inherently leads to more compatibility or toward people being happier in their marriage. My guess is that in the Middle Ages, it was probably a similar situation. I mean, you probably had a lot of aristocratic spouses who were quite happy together. In fact, we know that this was the case. We have examples of it in the sources. And you have spouses who could not stand each other. When we talk about allowing for the assumptions of a historical period, when we try to conceptualize how people thought about a certain issue, I think for the Middle Ages, one thing we do have to take into account is the fact that people thought in terms of groups so much more than we do today. Your life, your very legal standing was related to your group. For the nobility in the Middle Ages, they had dynastic concerns. They had concerns for their obligation to their particular group. So if you are a young nobleman, you are thinking about your particular dynasty, your family, and what's going to be best for your family. How is your family going to increase its prestige, its wealth, its power? These things are important to you in the same way that if you're a young person growing up today, you're thinking about okay, what am I going to do for a living? Where am I going to go to college? What type of career am I going to have? So I think we have to remember this. For a young noblewoman, a young nobleman, they would be thinking about this sort of thing, and this would influence their opinion about their marriage. Okay, this is a really good marriage for me because this is going to help my family, increase in power, increase in its wealth. So what I'm saying here is the nobleman picked by a girl's family likely was her ideal, in terms of the way she thought as a medieval noblewoman. This was the type of man she wanted to marry. The next question I would like to ask for this video is, are marriages in some way still arranged? We think about the way that people pick a spouse in today's world. It's often, as a result of social circles, career choices, religion, lifestyle choices. The person you end up with, it's related to all of these things. So in some ways, you enter into this marriage, this marital arrangement, as a result of your personal politics. Look at the fact that, say, for example, doctors so often marry other doctors. Like, if you're a doctor in med school, do you think to yourself, oh, I can't marry for true love because I'm surrounded only by other single doctors? Is that what you're thinking? In the same way that the medieval princess in a Hollywood movie thinks to herself, oh, I can't marry for true love because my family, is arranging my marriage to an eligible nobleman. So yeah, I guess what I'm saying here is, for people in today's world, this sort of arrangement, the fact that doctors tend to marry doctors, or that people end up marrying somebody based on their social circle, their career, their religion, do people today feel that is some big impediment to love, or that it's restrictive, that this is a restriction on the freedom of who you marry? In the same way, I think that people in the Middle Ages probably didn't look at an arranged marriage as some sort of inhibition to their personal flourishing. For them, this was as natural as the fact that today doctors often marry other doctors. Now, this doesn't mean that the arranged political marriage could not have led to unhappiness. I think there are probably examples of this happening. But then the reverse often happened, and we know that the reverse happened. We know there are examples where the historians record that this young couple met each other and they were immediately taken with each other. It was very clear that they were instantly quite enamored with one another. So my point just is that I think we have to allow for this, for all these things. We have to, take into account human nature, but then we also have to take into account the assumptions of the time and the fact that, the normalcy, the reality that arranged political marriage was just the most mainstream thing imaginable at the time. We have to take into account the fact that human beings often are very comfortable with whatever is the mainstream in their world. The other question I have personally often considered is whether or not the focus on lifestyle in our own world, does that kind of make people less happy in some ways? Like, people really do have to struggle over their life paths in some respect today. You graduate high school and there's just this variety of possibilities ahead of you. You could end up as a CEO, you could end up as a bum. Whereas in the past, like in the Middle Ages, for example, okay, you're the son of a blacksmith. Well, you're likely going to train to be a blacksmith. So that whole aspect of your life is kind of just set in stone. And often we view this as, oh, well, this must have been such an inhibition to freedom. This must have really just been an inhibition to the human spirit. Okay, maybe it was. It very well could have been, and maybe in some cases it was. But I also wonder, could this have been liberating in some respect? It's like, okay, well, you don't have to feel like everything about your future is dependent on you and choices you make. Even for a peasant, you're born a peasant, you're born in this certain village, you're born to a family that's been farming this area for centuries, it's going to be farming it for centuries. You have your community around you, your immediate family, your extended family. Your whole life is spent right there locked in with a group of people to whom you're very close. The most important people in your life are the people you're working with every day. As opposed to today, people, as they pursue their life path, they move a lot, communities are disrupted, their personal circle is often disrupted, the circle of people they have around them is constantly changing. I don't know, I just wonder if perhaps kind of the more set in stone reality of one's occupation in the Middle Ages, maybe this could have made people happier. And I'm not saying that I know this for sure in any way, but one wonders. Anxiety, depression, these are very real things in our world today. And I do wonder if the fact that people were more entrenched in their community in the Middle Ages, the fact that life was kind of more preordained, that less of the pressure was on them. I don't know. Maybe this could have made people happier. So anyway, hope you guys enjoyed the video. I will talk to you soon.